There are two colonies living side by side in the same field. Same soil, same weather, same number of workers, same resources to work with. 10 years later, one colony has built the most sophisticated tunnel network in the region. Deep chambers, food reserves, efficient routes, a population that keeps growing. The other colony is still working just as hard. Maybe harder, actually. But they're exactly where they started. A little more tired. A little less food than last season. Nobody stole from them. No predator hit. No disaster. Nothing. The difference between these two colonies is not how hard they work. It can only be seen in the order they do things. And almost all of that order, almost all of it, plays out before 8 a.m. I'm the wise ant. And today we're going to walk through 10 things the prosperous colony does in the early hours that the struggling colony leaves until evening, or the weekend, or next month, or honestly, never. These are not motivational habits. I'm not going to tell you to wake up at 5 a.m. and take a cold shower. What I am going to tell you is why the timing of certain financial decisions changes their outcome completely. Why the exact same action done at the wrong moment produces a fraction of the result. And why most people are, without realizing it, doing everything in reverse. Let's start before sunrise. Thing 1. The rich colony moves food to storage before the workers eat. In the struggling colony, food comes in and the workers take what they need. Whatever is left over, if there's anything, gets stored. This feels logical. You earn, you cover your needs, you save the rest. The problem is that the rest is almost always smaller than you planned. Sometimes it's zero. Sometimes it's actually a negative number because somewhere along the way you covered a few wants alongside the needs and didn't really notice the difference until the storage was already empty. The prosperous colony does something different. When food arrives, a fixed portion goes directly to storage before a single worker eats. Not after. Not from what's left over. First. This isn't a new idea. Every serious financial educator in history has said some version of it. Pay yourself first. Automate the savings before you see the money. Make the good decision before the temptation even exists. But here's the specific reason it belongs at number 1. And the reason it happens before 8 a.m. The earlier in the day this happens, the less likely it is to be reversed. If your savings transfer goes out the moment your paycheck lands, at 6 a.m. on a Thursday, while you're still half asleep, you never actually make the decision. The money is gone before the part of your brain that wants things has properly woken up. Leave it until the evening, and you've spent 12 hours accumulating wants. Seeing prices, talking to people, experiencing friction. The amount that finally moves to storage shrinks accordingly. Do it first. Do it automatically. Do it before 8 a.m. Thing 2. The prosperous colony checks the tunnel map before it sends anyone out. Before the first forager leaves the nest, the experienced ants review what they already have. How much food is stored? Which tunnels are efficient? Which ones are quietly wasting energy? Where the colony is losing resources without anyone having noticed yet. In the struggling colony, the workers go out every morning with enormous effort and absolutely no review. They work hard all day, come home tired. Nobody checked whether the effort was going in the right direction. Nobody noticed that Tunnel 7 has been consuming twice the energy it used to because of a small crack that showed up 3 weeks ago. In personal finance, this is a monthly budget review. Not a big annual accounting exercise, nothing that dramatic. A quick 10-minute look at where the money went last month and where it's going this month. Done in the morning, before the day starts, before you've spent anything. What comes out of those 10 minutes is clarity. You see the crack in Tunnel 7, the subscription that renewed, the category that crept up by $40 without any single purchase feeling significant, the automatic payment you forgot you authorized 6 months ago. The struggling colony never sees these things because it never looks before it moves. It only looks back at the end of the year when the damage is already compounded. 10 minutes. Before 8 a.m. Every first Monday of the month. That's the whole habit. Thing 3. Rich ants give every piece of food a job before it even enters the colony. The prosperous colony runs on a rule that sounds almost rigid until you understand why it actually works. Every unit of food that arrives has a destination before it arrives. Storage, consumption, maintenance, expansion. The categories exist before the food does. The struggling colony receives food and then decides, which means it doesn't really decide. It spins reactively, covering the loudest need first, then the next loudest until the food is gone. The quiet but important needs, the ones that don't shout, like long-term reserves and tunnel maintenance, get whatever's left, which is often nothing. This is zero-based budgeting in practice. Every pound or dollar of income gets assigned to a category before the month begins. Housing, food, transport, savings, debt repayment, entertainment. Every unit has a job. Nothing gets left unassigned, because unassigned money disappears. Every time. This doesn't require perfection. It requires a plan. Even a rough plan, made before the month starts, at 7 a.m. on the first of the month with a cup of something warm, produces dramatically better outcomes than no plan at all. Because a plan made in advance reflects your values. A plan made in the moment reflects your impulses. Assign the food before it arrives. Then follow the assignment. Thing 4. The prosperous colony repairs small cracks before the morning shift begins. There's a specific habit in the rich colony that the struggling colony considers optional. Every morning, before the main work starts, a small team moves through the tunnels and fixes anything that degraded overnight. Small cracks, minor blockages, sections where the structure is weakening but hasn't failed yet. The struggling colony fixes things when they break, when the tunnel collapses, when the crack becomes a flood, when the small problem has been left long enough to become an emergency that can't be ignored. The cost difference between these two approaches is enormous. In financial terms, this is maintenance spending done on schedule rather than repair spending done in a crisis. The boiler service in October rather than the boiler replacement in January when it breaks down. The dental checkup that catches a small cavity rather than the root canal that treats the abscess that the cavity became. The car service that costs $200 rather than the breakdown that costs $2,000. Emergency spending is almost always more expensive than scheduled maintenance. The repair bill is higher. The urgency premium is higher. The disruption to everything else is higher. The rich colony understands that small expenses paid willingly on a schedule protect against large expenses paid unwillingly in a crisis. The struggling colony calls the maintenance spending unnecessary, right up until the crisis makes it inevitable. Check the tunnels every morning. Fix small things before they become big things. Thing 5. The rich ant doesn't touch the winter reserve in summer. In the prosperous colony, there's a chamber that is never opened between April and September. It holds the reserves for winter. Every ant knows it exists. Every ant knows it is not for current consumption. It's not even a temptation, because it has a specific purpose in a specific season, and those two things together create a wall that willpower alone could never build. The struggling colony has reserves too, but they're not labeled. They're not separated. They sit in the same place as the regular food supply, and they're psychologically available whenever the regular supply feels like it isn't quite enough, which happens a lot. So the winter reserve gets used in August, and then winter arrives and the colony is unprepared, not because it was irresponsible, but because it never created the structural separation that makes the reserve actually feel real. This is the emergency fund in a separate account, not in your current account, not in the same app as your daily spending. In a different bank, preferably one that takes 2 or 3 days to transfer from, with a name like Winter Reserve or just Do Not Touch. The friction is the feature. You want it to be slightly annoying to access. You want there to be a moment of administrative inconvenience between the impulse and the withdrawal, because that moment is where most bad decisions stop. Label the chamber. Lock it for winter. Lose the key a little bit on purpose. Thing 6. Before the workers go anywhere, the prosperous colony sends one ant to check the price of food across multiple sources. The rich colony has a scout whose only job in the early morning is comparison. Before any bulk purchase is made, before any significant resource gets committed, She checks 3 or 4 different sources and reports back. Not because the colony is cheap, because the same food often costs 30% less 2 tunnels over, and nobody would ever know unless someone actually looked. The struggling colony sends workers directly to the nearest source every time. Efficient in the short term, expensive across a lifetime. In practice, this is the habit of comparing before committing. The insurance renewal that arrives and gets paid without ever checking whether the same cover is available for less elsewhere. The mortgage that rolls onto the standard variable rate and stays there for years because switching feels complicated. The subscription service at full price because the promotional rate expired and nobody noticed. None of these individual decisions feels catastrophic. But together, across 10 or 15 years, they add up to a number that would cause most people real distress if they ever saw it as a single figure. The scout habit takes about 20 minutes, once a year, per major expense. Switch the car insurance. Check the mortgage rate. Review the utility providers. Look at what's still on recurring billing. Send the scout before 8 a.m. The workers can go out once she reports back. Thing 7. The rich colony plants before it needs to harvest. This might be the most important separation between the two colonies. The one that creates the largest gap over time. The struggling colony responds to hunger. When food runs low, it forages. When reserves are high, it rests. The cycle is reactive. Supply follows need. The prosperous colony operates on a completely different calendar. It plants during abundance. It tends during comfort. It harvests during scarcity. The planting and the tending happen long before any need exists, which means when the need finally arrives, the harvest is already waiting. In financial terms, this is investing before you need the returns. Contributions to an index fund in your 20s don't feel necessary. Retirement is 40 years away. The present need is more immediate, and the present wants are louder. But the compounding that happens in those early decades is irreplaceable. A pound invested at 25 is worth dramatically more at 65 than a pound invested at 45. Not because the investment is different, because time is doing most of the work, and time cannot be purchased later. The rich ant plants in spring not because spring is hungry, but because winter is coming and winter doesn't care about your intentions. Now, if this idea of planting early is something you want to actually act on, I've left a short breakdown of the simplest way to start in the description. Index fund, automated contribution, 10 minutes to set up. Link is down there. Start planting before you need to harvest. The morning to do this is any morning before you've decided it's too early. Thing 8. Before 8 a.m., the prosperous colony reviews what the struggling colony is doing and decides not to copy it. This one sounds arrogant. It isn't. It's a discipline. The most powerful financial force working against ordinary people isn't debt or inflation or taxes. It's comparison. The pressure to maintain a visible standard of living relative to the people around you. The colony next door got bigger chambers last season. The colony across the field has new tunnels. The workers come home and see these things and feel the pull to match them. The struggling colony responds to that pull. It expands the chambers when the chambers aren't needed yet. It builds the new tunnels because the neighbors built them. It signals prosperity before it has achieved it. And it pays for that signaling with the reserves it needed for winter. The prosperous colony does something uncomfortable every morning. It reviews its own balance sheet, not the neighbor's visible assets. It makes decisions based on what its own reserves actually require, not on what the colony next door appears to have. It defers visible prosperity in favor of actual prosperity and accepts that for long stretches of time nobody will be able to tell the difference from the outside. This is the hardest habit on this list, because the pull of comparison is not rational. It doesn't respond to logic. It responds only to a very clear and repeatedly renewed commitment to your own plan over someone else's appearance. Review your own tunnel map, not theirs, every morning, before the workers go out and start comparing. Thing 9. The rich colony calculates the full cost of a new tunnel before breaking a single grain of soil. In the prosperous colony, No major project begins without a complete cost picture. Not just the construction cost, the maintenance cost, the workers it'll take to keep it running, the opportunity cost of the resources committed, the risk if the tunnel fails. All of it, before anything moves. The struggling colony calculates the acquisition cost and begins. The house costs $300,000. What it costs to own the house, service the mortgage, maintain the structure, pay the property taxes, heat the rooms, insure the contents, replace what degrades over 20 years. That calculation never actually gets made before the decision. The car costs $20,000. The insurance, fuel, servicing, depreciation, parking, and financing costs that quietly turn it into a £60,000 commitment over 7 years. Those numbers exist in theory, but not in the moment the decision gets made. This isn't an argument against buying houses or cars. It's an argument for knowing the actual cost of things before you own them rather than after. The prosperous colony calls this total cost of ownership. Before any major financial decision, it asks not what does this cost to acquire, but what does this cost to own? The answer is almost always significantly higher than the purchase price. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that answer changes the decision. Break no ground before you know the full map. Calculate before you commit. Do it in the morning, calmly, before the excitement of the thing you want has completely taken over. Thing 10. Before 8 a.m., the rich ant feeds the colony's future self first. We've talked about saving, investing, maintenance and reserves, and cost calculation. But there's a final habit that sits underneath all of them and makes them possible. The prosperous colony operates with an image of what it will need in winter that is just as vivid and just as motivating as what it needs today. The future cold is as real to the planning ant as the present warmth. This is not natural. It has to be built deliberately. The struggling colony cannot feel the winter from inside the summer. The future need is abstract. The present one is concrete. And the concrete always wins against the abstract unless something deliberately gives the abstract equal weight. In practice, this is having a specific and named financial goal that you actually look at every single morning before you spend anything. Not a vague intention to save more. A number, a date, an image of what the winter reserve will mean when winter comes. The retirement account that reaches a specific figure by a specific year. The mortgage overpayment that removes a specific number of years from the term. The emergency fund that reaches 3 months of expenses and stays there. The morning review is the habit that keeps all of this real. 10 seconds before you open your banking app. Before you check your emails. Before the day starts and the present wants reassert themselves. What is the number? What is the date? Is today moving toward it or away from it? Feed the future self first. Every morning, before 8 a.m. Here's what both colonies look like from the outside after 10 years. The struggling colony is still working, maybe harder than ever. The workers aren't lazy. They're not irresponsible. They're doing exactly what they always did, responding to the present, covering the needs, fixing the emergencies, trying to keep up. The prosperous colony looks, from the outside, like it got lucky. The tunnels go deeper. The reserves are full. The workers have more margin, more flexibility, more room to make the occasional mistake without it becoming a full crisis. But if you could see inside the colony at 7 a.m. 10 years ago, you wouldn't see anything dramatic. A few ants moving food to storage before anyone eats. A scout heading out to check prices. A quick review of the tunnel map. A calculation of total cost before any ground gets broken. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that required unusual talent or exceptional discipline or some secret that only certain colonies have access to. Just 10 things done in the right order. Before 8 a.m. The field is the same for both colonies. The weather is the same. The resources are the same. The only thing that was ever different was the sequence. And the sequence starts before sunrise.